Hey, Wolf Manzella here. I created a tabletop role-playing game called Dick Wizards. I created it earlier this year. It's about playing detective wizards in modern-day Providence, Rhode Island, and you are trying to use magic to solve crazy, weird, Lovecraftian crimes and mysteries. So today, in this video, I'm going to go over the basics about what the game is and what you need to play and everything to internalize the rules so that you can get past that hard, difficult part of learning a brand new game. Because I know that that is the worst thing when a new game comes out and the dungeon master's really excited. They're like, hey, let's play Dick Wizards, and everybody groans because they're like, I don't want to learn the new rules. Trust me, this game is super simple to play. It encourages creativity from the players, and from a GM standpoint, I have made it silky smooth to run so that you're not constantly looking up rules and fighting with the system. So let's go, let's figure out how to play this game together. Dick Wizards takes place in Providence, Rhode Island, the home of Lovecraft. Everybody at the table, you're going to be an apprentice-level wizard that can cast low-level spells. You are hired by the city, and your job is to uncover these Lovecraftian crimes and mysteries and figure out what's going on. You're not going to do that by using normal detective methods. Because you're wizards, you get to cast spells. And in this game, the spell system is all about creativity. You can think of any kind of low-level spell and you can cast it in this game. There are sort of drawbacks and restrictions, but for the most part, an imaginative player is going to be able to come up with really fun and incredible spells that are going to help them just crush through these mysteries and get to the bottom of all this Lovecraftian nonsense. All right, players, if you want to play Dick Wizards, here's what you need. You're going to need a pen or pencil, some sort of writing utensil. You're going to need a character sheet. You're going to need something to scribble notes on and create your spells. You're also going to need some dice. Dick Wizards uses a D12 specifically. That is the primary die that you're going to be rolling. You're going to need a couple D12s, and having a couple D6s lying around is going to be useful as well. That's all you need to start playing. The player that decides to run Dick Wizards is known as a fortune teller. Your job is to facilitate the game. You're going to come up with the mysteries. You're going to control all the NPCs, the monsters that the wizards face. But most importantly, you're going to be controlling the tarot deck. In order to play Dick Wizards, this is very important. The fortune teller, the player who does that role, you need to bring a tarot deck to the game. You need a standard tarot deck that consists of 78 cards. I recommend just using a standard Rider-Waite tarot deck for this game that has your wands, your cups, your pentacles, and your swords as the suits, along with the major arcana. If you get a deck that is different or has different suits than that, it works fine. But for your first time playing, I would just say get a standard tarot deck. That works best. Anytime you do something in the world as a wizard, that's called an action. Normally, you can just do actions. Walking down the hall, opening up a door, looking through a drawer. These things just happen. You will tell the fortune teller what you're doing, and they will describe back what is happening. Anytime there is a disconnect there where the fortune teller is like, I don't know if your wizard would be able to perform this task, that is when we're going to do an attribute test. All of the wizards have 5 basic attributes that they can test against. That's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and charisma. There's also the Kismet stat, which will sort of determine if something lucky happens to you. But for the most part, the fortune teller is going to ask you to test against those 5 basic attributes. When this happens, let's say you're trying to break down a door and you're not using magic to do so, the fortune teller says, okay, give me a strength test. You're going to look at your strength stat. Let's say it's a 7. You roll your D12 and you are looking to roll under 7. Not equal to, but under 7. So that means a 1 through a 6 is going to be a success. Dick Wizards also uses an advantage-disadvantage system. If the wizard thinks that they are in an advantageous situation and that they should probably succeed at the skill that they're rolling against or the attribute that they're rolling against, the fortune teller can grant them advantage. In this case, you're going to roll 2d12s and you're going to take the lower result. Likewise, if the fortune teller thinks that you're in a bad situation, like you're trying to escape from a monster and the floor is slippery, they're going to make you roll with disadvantage. They're going to say test your dexterity attribute with disadvantage. In that case, you're going to roll 2d12s and you're going to take the higher result. Fortune tellers, if you're running the game, you do not need to keep track of time. Instead, Dick Wizards uses what we call scenes. There's going to be a morning, a noon, and an evening scene. The players, the wizards, anytime that they switch major locations going from one part of the city to another, they're going to advance time to the next scene. So if they're at the library in the morning and they're going to be heading to a suspect's house, they're going to go from the morning scene to the noon scene, and then you can sort of have a montage of what happens in between. Maybe they stop to get lunch, maybe they stop by HQ, their little headquarters, pick something up. They can describe doing that, but you are never going to be writing down the seconds, the minutes. You're not tracking dungeon time here. We're going to be abstracting as much as we can to make the game run as smooth as possible. So along with abstracting time, I've also abstracted movement in Dick Wizards. So you're not going to be using a battle mat, and you're not going to be using miniatures to count squares when you're attacking enemies or you're moving around environments. Everything is described using theater of the mind. And if you need to get into more minutia than that, I describe it using zones. That means if you're standing next to a monster, you are considered to be adjacent to them. So everything is measured from the wizard away from them. So if the monster is next to you, it's adjacent. If it's in the same room, it's near. If it's in the hallway that is connected to that room, it is considered far. And if it's 2 rooms away or 3 rooms away, that's considered distant. As you're moving in combat, if you want to move, you can move from zone to zone. So you can move from near to far or from far to distant, depending on how distant away a character or enemy is. If your players are really confused or don't understand where they're standing in regards to enemies, what you can do is just plop down a couple of index cards, write down the rooms, and then you can move. Each index card would be a zone. So if you need to move from the den to the hallway, you pick up, I just use basic pawns and stuff, and I would pick up the player's pawn and I'd move it into the hallway. That is moving one zone. Don't get wrapped up in the minutia of tactical play. That is not how this game is really meant to be played. And that's the basics of how you play Dick Wizards. You just need to have a D12, roll under your stat, describe what you're doing, and that'll get you pretty much through most of the game. If you can wrap your head around that concept, rolling low is good. Other than that, we're going to have some magic, which we're going to get to in another video, but before that, I think we should make a character together. So go ahead and click on this next video, and we will roll up your titular Dick Wizard together.